different scholars, they worked, some of them secretly, some of them openly, and then at the end, they started gradually crossing the notes. The summary was that those 5 books, they use different names for God. Sometimes the name is used as Yahweh, Jehovah, and sometimes it is used as Elohim. Now, the person who is using the word Jehovah or Yahweh, his concept of God is a little different, actually a lot more different, than the person who is writing the concept using the word Elohim. And I will come back and explain more. There is polytheism, there is the existence of many gods, and even God himself allows other gods' existence in the narrative which is using the word Elohim. Elohim. And the person presents God in a human shape, like you and me. God who has got hands, eyes, walking, talking, crying, eating. And the one who is using the word Yahweh has got a little bit higher concept of God. That God is jealous God. He does not allow other gods to be worshipped in front of him. That God has got his own locality where he says, in this area nobody else should be worshipped. But still that God is like a human being who eats, drinks, weeps, cries, all of those kind of things. They also figured out that there are certain areas of the 5 books of Moses where there is so much focus upon priestly words, how to respect the priest, how to follow their sacraments, how to follow the type of sacrifices they do, how to worship through the priest, and how to use all of that. So they are more focused upon priestly rulings. Then they figured out that there is a complete other narrative called Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy has got different style, different language, different vocabulary, and different dates, and different concept of God. That God is high God, believes in one God, monolatry, henotheism, like does not allow the other worship. So therefore, this is what is called the documentary hypothesis. This is what they say. Now you can read it. J, they said that there are at least 4 different authors who are writing these books, and then there is a 5th author who redacted, took all of those 4 and put them in one book. So what they said is that at least the bare minimum there are 4 or 5 people who are writing over centuries, not by one person, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, but they are writing over centuries, and then there is a 5th person who put all of that traditions into one book. This is what we call Torah, or the 5 books of Moses, and I'll give you some of the examples for the reasons, if you can just read this one. A writer who uses Jehovah name, okay? The other writer uses Elohim. The author of book of Deuteronomy and priestly source is the one who talks mostly about the interest of the priesthood. And then the 4th one, which is called the R source, which redacted, we brought all of those traditions together and put it in the shape which is called right now the book of Torah. Now you can read this one. I'm just going to ask you if you can get hold of one book, who wrote Bible. This is R.E. Friedman or Friedman, okay? He is a scholar who has summarized most of the theories and had the discussions of the evangelical, orthodox, reformed, all of them in this book, which is a summarized version, who wrote the Bible. And the credit is given to Wellhausen. He is a scholar with whose name all of these things go back to 18th century. That now there's not a single scholar in the field of the biblical studies who is really engaged in the historical study of the Bible, who will claim that these 5 books were written by either by Moses or by one person, or at one time. So in the academia, it's kind of consensus right now that these books were written by different individuals who were sitting in different places using different literary styles, linguistic styles, cultural backgrounds, thought patterns, names, and what happens is at least there are two different kinds of stories even when it comes to the book of Genesis, or the story of the flood, or the story of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, story of covenant. There are two different stories and they do not match with the details when they put together. These are called the doublets, and there are some triplets, that something talks about the same story, but the versions are three. And those three do not match with each other. So therefore, if somebody is talking about the same incident and there are three different details, these are called triplets, that they contradict with each other. It cannot be from the same person. There are three different people writing it. Just read this one and I'll take you to the next slide. Now the theologians have observed the presence of doublets in the Pentateuch. These are pairs of stories which occur in two separate locations in the text. The doublets generally do not agree fully. There are usually minor differences between these stories, and you can read more details in the book, and some of the examples are given here. There are two creation stories in the book of Genesis. There are two descriptions of Abrahamic covenant. There are two stories of the naming of Ishaq, why Ishaq was given the name Ishaq. Two instances where Ibrahim deceived a king by introducing his wife Sarah as his sister. Two stories of Jacob traveling to Mesopotamia. Two stories of a revelation at Bethel to Jacob. Two accounts of God changing Jacob's name to Israel. Two instances where Moses extracted water from two different rocks at two different locations called Meribah. A more logical explanation is that the books were written by multiple authors, because if you are talking about the Genesis, how God created the world, and there are two different stories, it cannot be from the same author. So what happens is they would have allowed the oral tradition to be passed from generation to generation in different areas of the land, so that they had a chance to deviate from each other before being written down. In a few cases, triplets have been found in the Pentateuch where the same account appears 3 times. Just take the example. For instance, in Genesis 7:15, in the story of the flood, these verses have Noah collecting 2 of each species of animals, 1 male and 1 female. Min kullin zawjayn ithnayn, as the Quran says. That from each species, from men, 1 male, 1 female, from buffaloes, from cows, from each species, 1 male and 1 female. In the Genesis chapter 7, verse number 2, it specifies that he took only 7 pairs of clean animals and birds and 1 pair of unclean animals. Genesis 7:11 describes water coming from the heavens and from below the ground to generate the worldwide flood. But Genesis 7:4 describes all of the water falling as a rain. Earth did not produce anything, mountains did not produce anything, everything came in the rain. Okay?